we're going to make a start. Lovely to see such a crowd here at St. Mary's Hall. Did we all really enjoy that lovely film by Rupa? So you're very welcome to the annual gathering for ChangeMakers Donegal. I'm Myra McAuliffe. I'm the project coordinator of ChangeMakers at the Inishowen Development Partnership. We decided to change up the format a bit this year. We've been really enjoying our conversations towards action. We find they work really well to kind of sit together and talk about local and global issues. So we decided to go for that format again this year, and we're focusing, of course, on the topic of food. We're so pleased to have Rupa and Ollie here with us. So Joanne Fullerton from ChangeMakers met Ollie down at Feeding Ourselves and had the great idea to bring Ollie up, and that was last summer, and we did food farming and solidarity at that point. And it's just been great to get to know Ollie and to collaborate with Ollie. Really strategic thinker, really kind, connecting person. And of course, he then has introduced us to Rupa, who's making such an impact in Ireland after just 8 months here. We're very lucky to have you. We're also really honoured to be joined this weekend by Mahmoud Zwahra from Bethlehem in Palestine. We heard from Mahmoud and Bernard de Kooster from Winyock Organic Farm out in Dunree last night. There was around 60 of us trooping across the farmland and eating beautiful food and watching a film in a barn. So lovely to have Mahmoud with us again today, and thanks Bernard for making it today as well. And to all of you for making the effort to come this afternoon. So now I'm going to hand over to my colleague Joanne, who's going to be the facilitator for today's session, and she's going to guide us all the way through. And then I'm going to say thank yous at the end, and then we're going to have a lovely food as medicine themed meal prepared by Kate Ann Sexton from Coola Tea. So we all have that to look forward to. So thank you very much and enjoy.
Thank you all so much for coming. It's really, really wonderful to see you all here, every single one of you. Kate Mila Falcha to our wonderful guests for coming all the way up here to Inishowen. And just to begin with, I'm going to ask you just to introduce yourselves, and then we'll take it for a few questions from there.
Gormaget, is Mr. Rupa, is more an honor de ave and show. Let's see, is as California May, August Punjab, August Takonayorum in Cloughjordan. And I'm very honored to be here. I am here in Ireland in service of Eru and my children's ancestors, and it has been the greatest opportunity I've had to live what I'm supposed to be living right now. So thank you.
So Oliver Morga is Adam Dum, Tom and McConey, Cloughjordan, Kunde Tipperary. So I'm Oliver Moore. I live in Cloughjordan in County Tipperary, and Eru, Bomba, and Fola, all three of them. We need them all. So I'm in service of the three sisters.
Thank you. Here a little bit. All right. So the first question that we have here is for Rupa. A very straightforward one, but I'm sure you have a less than straightforward answer. So when people are disconnected from the land, how does that affect them?
Yeah, that's a very important question, especially here in Ireland. What I've seen is that people are disconnected from their own homeland, which is just it's wild. And by that I mean land relationship, land knowing, daily land practice, getting your hands in the dirt, protecting the land, loving the land. making love to the land, honoring the water. And that those practices that we all have in the places where our ancestors grew up, those practices are what keep us healthy. Because when we honor the personhood of the mountain and the personhood of the river, we would not let it get polluted. We would not abuse the land. And so we are living with the remnants and the constant structures of colonial capitalism in our everyday, all over the world. It's been a virus that's affected almost every place I've been, almost. And the impact of colonialism, if you think of that as divide and conquer, it divides us from our duties of care to one another. It divides us from our ancestries. It divides us from our ways of knowing how to be good relatives on this earth. And it divides us from the division, from the land and from the people, and from the web of life. And the impact of that division is chronic inflammatory disease. And I know it sounds like a stretch, but it's not. Because when we don't remember who we are, and we don't have the practices that actually create ecosystems and economies of care, what happens to the immune system is that it's just being bombarded with damaged signals. And these damaged signals drive a chronic inflammatory response in the body. And so when we look at depression, anxiety, suicidality, alcohol use disorder, different drug use disorders, when we look at Alzheimer's, when we look at cardiovascular disease, strokes, inflammatory bowel disease. Now the leading cause of cirrhosis is not alcohol anymore, it's chronic inflammation of the liver. The leading cause of end-stage renal getting on dialysis is chronic inflammation of the kidney. We are living in the time of fire, and it's in our bodies, it's sedimented in our bodies, and it is because we have been severed from this immune system, which is the biology that's wrapped around us when we care for land, when we care for each other, when we enter sacred, reciprocal relationships with land and one another. I spent a lot of time touring with a band. I know this sounds crazy, but as a musician and a doctor. And I'd be in the hospital at the bedside of patients for 20 years, at the bedside 6 months of the year, and then on the road with a band 6 months of the year. And if I had gone with my stethoscope and my research to these different communities where I'd go, I'd take the band, we'd play the big festival, and then we go to the sides, and we go to the interstitium and the places where people are falling apart in the cracks of society that were designed for them to fall apart to fall into. I would go and learn what was keeping people healthy and what was making them sick. And it became very clear after 5-10 years of going between at the bedside of the hospital and in the fields with the people, that what was making them sick were the structures around the body, was the way that history sediments in our bodies, was the disrupted relationships of land and care for people. And so to fix that, as a doctor, I can give you all insulin, I can give you your anti-Alzheimer's medication. Alzheimer's is not a normal, dementia is not a normal way of aging. It's inflammation in the brain. And so we can give medicines to abate the inflammation, but the real treatment is to redesign the structures so that the body will respond to the care. And that's the beauty of this, is that while the severing causes inflammation, the bringing back together to heal actually abates inflammation. So that's my thesis of our book in 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 3 minutes.
Rupa's book, co-authored with Raj Patel, it's called Inflamed, and it's a really amazing book. I would recommend that you all get yourself a copy. But yes, thank you so much for that, Rupa. It's dealing with these what can be really heavy, overwhelming issues, but then also along with the message that it's reimagining and redesigning and reconnecting, and then it gets really exciting. And then that's a really great way you're all in the room, so we can be talking about this stuff as the evening goes on. So Ollie, over to you. So you were here last July, and it was like a class event. It was a really great weekend, and you were talking about your time in Palestine when you were here and about how that work is grounded in food sovereignty. Would you care to tell us what is food sovereignty and why is it important in Palestine and what does it mean for changing the Irish food system?
Okay, yeah, thanks Joanne. There's a good bit in there. So yeah, maybe to start with the Palestine bit. So I guess it was to meet practitioners of food sovereignty, to meet Palestinian farmers who were still connected strongly to the land. And as Mahmoud will talk about later, the being connected to the land gives you some sense of ability to resist and to build a society. And being sundered from that connection is what makes it more difficult to be free, to be sovereign, to be a people. You know, if you're dependent on wages in Israel and aid coming in and so on, it's a different dynamic than if you're on the land being connected. So a huge part of what happens in Palestine is that Area C, which is basically the rural part, is where settlers are constantly attacking and pushing people back from their land and stealing their land and changing their land and changing the plants on the land and so on. So I went to Palestine with sort of the global food sovereignty movement really to make a connection and to bring the stories back that I'd encountered and to try and connect farmers up as well, which we did with a Sheet the Cree event recently, connecting up young farmers in Palestine with young farmers in Ireland. And we intend to keep doing that kind of work. But food sovereignty is a really interesting frame. I keep coming back to it. It keeps becoming kind of useful again and again and again because it's fundamentally about people's right to define their food system. At its core level, it's about people's ability to shape the food that they eat, but also to have a say in how the landscape is managed around them that's producing that food. So it's about, so just as a concrete example, where I live, we have a community-owned farm that's member-owned and operated. So we collected, so 70 families come together, we pool our resources, we pay wages for farmers, we do participatory budgeting, so we figure out how much it costs to do the things that we need to do, and then we do them. So we're in charge of who farms, of how they farm, and there's 20 or 30 people of this like 120 person group who actually help define what the food is that we eat. So we have sovereignty to a large extent over our vegetable consumption, but as well as that, just from a farm level, if you're not, like our bill isn't super high for inputs, we don't have a fertilizer bill. So the feed, fertilizer, fossil fuel squeeze we have right now doesn't affect our farm so much because it's an agroecological farm. It affects other people in other ways for sure, but you have more food sovereignty as a food producer if you're not dependent on those agri-industrial inputs and contributing to the damage they cause as well. Like 90% of Irish habitats are in bad shape. So food sovereignty works from the ground up with agroecological knowledge exchange between farmers and with resource carefulness, with embedded practices, with participatory communities, and then goes up to the next level, which is an agroecological infrastructure for communities to be able to feed themselves coherently. We've lost the gap between domestic and international trade in Ireland is actually widening and widening and widening. We have fewer domestic supports from organisations like Teagasc and Borbia for Irish producers to supply locally and regionally and domestically than we had 15 years ago proportionally. But Borbia's budget has gone up 50 million euros since 2008. Agri-food exports, the value of them has basically doubled up to 19 billion now. But we don't even have a section in Borbia that deals with small producers now. We just have sustainability officers who deal with the export market. And we don't have Borbia Vantage anymore, we don't have the Taste Council, so we don't have a food sovereignty focus. But to bring a food sovereignty focus in, what you would bring in then at the regional level is an agroecological supportive infrastructure. So there's different distribution, there's different processing, there's ways that communities can organise themselves to do food differently as well. So it supports the farmer who wants to supply locally. At the national level, it's changing some of those policies and those balances. And at the international level, you start to look at stabilising prices and markets for producers and consumers because food is a right. You're looking at public food stocks, but public food stocks starting to feed into agroecological production and helping people transition in that way, and for trade to be fair. So that's kind of the levels that food sovereignty operates on, but fundamentally it's about us having more of a say in the food that is around us, and the food that's being produced around us, the food that we eat, also the landscape, how it's managed and so on, all the way up through those different levels. And like what inspired me about the film as well was seeing the rooftop gardens, because people would have seen them here as well last year, like the rooftop gardens in Bethlehem at the Ida refugee camp. Just outside it, the Talamh Centre has a rooftop garden there, which I visited, and that's what inspired me to interview Rupa, as opposed to just have Rupa's film at Feeding Ourselves 2 years ago. When I saw that rooftop garden, and then it reminded me of the one in Bethlehem, and then it was like, well, people really are resourceful, they really find ways to find places to express their food sovereignty. What does that mean? And then I started thinking a lot more about decolonial agriculture and what Ireland has been left with as an agricultural system. So just to finish, that system of mass exportation is a legacy of the colonial tram lines, literally and metaphorically, the colonial kind of train lines and shipping lanes that took stuff off the island and deindustrialized Ireland. Like, Ireland had a very vibrant agri-food system in lots of ways. Things like fisheries and dairy products were ubiquitous and multifaceted. So like, I brought yogurt I started making from milk from one particular farm as part of sort of decolonial practice here this weekend, because it was like, we used to have dozens of types of yogurt and cheese, all through thousands of years of Irish history. People were completely connected to the cow and to having cows and to making all these sour and lumpy and things that we wouldn't see even as food almost now. The hardest cheese is like hard as a golf ball to store value. Whereas after the after colonialism started, by the 1800s, people didn't know what cheese was, right? So if you presented a block of cheese to somebody in 1820 in rural Ireland, they wouldn't know what it was. Whereas we spent thousands of years making dozens of different types of cheese for thousands of years. So we deindustrialized with colonization. Often you hear, well, wasn't it great that there was trade routes, and wasn't there like spiced beef at Christmas in the cities? And yeah, those things did happen for sure. And the English market was like, a market for the ship industry, for the British Navy and so on. But we lost so much, and bringing that back is part of food sovereignty and part of sort of decolonizing eating, I would say. There you go.
So in the United States right now, as communities look at how to organize against the ICE raids, the disappearances of our neighbors that are happening right now, one of the main things that we're talking about is food sovereignty. Because when people grow their own food, they can say, I don't like this, I'm gonna actually walk off the job. I'm gonna engage in a general strike. I'm gonna withhold my labor from a system that is taking the dollars into weapons to murder children in Gaza. And people are finally connecting these dots. But what the average American eats is being force-fed through our supermarkets. It's ultra-processed foods, which we now know through the studies in the medical journals damage every organ system in the human body. The average Irish diet, the caloric intake is 45% of those calories come from ultra-processed foods. That's the second highest in the EU. Those are foods with ingredients that are not food. Anything that damages every organ in the human body is a poison. It's not a food. And the thing is, these corporations where the money of this food system is going actually off the island, these corporations keep us too sick, distracted, and depressed to fight back. So if we want to innovate the kinds of social changes that need to happen right now as the planet is heaving from climate, as young people can't find housing, as the population ages, as the rivers are polluted, you're gonna have to be healthy enough to fight, to resist. And that resistance is right there in the earth, it's ready for you. And so that sovereignty for food is so much a part of the architecture of resistance. It is how we thrive, it is how we survive.
Thank you so much. So I would love to hear some questions from the audience. If anyone is sitting at their edge of the seat. We have one to stand here now.
Gur míle mahagat, Scanán Harbar, is really Michelle Nina, is doctor me, freshen. So I'll end up the Irish for now. I'm a doctor as well, and my family come from Bengal. So I noticed in the film you mentioned specifically about the famine, obviously, of 100 years ago, and Ireland has its own Girth of Moor. So there should be a lot of solidarity between various nations that have been colonised, particularly by the British, but obviously not exclusively. But it's very interesting that one of the things that you said was divide and conquer. And this is the part of the problem that we are seeing most, is that groups that are oppressed, instead of uniting, are turning on people who have even less. And it's really frightening, because that whole point about whether it's racism, whether it's any of this, it's distraction. So you have to distract people so they're doing something else. And if you can't distract them, then you divide them so that they are fighting each other instead of uniting together to fight against those who are actually oppressing them. But when you specifically mentioned about food, and particularly this issue of inflammation and autoimmune diseases, it's very interesting because there is that concept that they call the hygiene hypothesis, this idea that if we're being too clean, so there's an aspect of not being in contact with nature. It's not as dirt as the issue, it's that contact with nature and the variety, and it's the same with people. If people don't come across different cultures, they don't know how to interact when they're adults. I work in Derry, and there's quite a bit obviously about sectarianism. Same idea. It's the idea of not being exposed to different views or different things. It's really interesting because, as you said, a lot of autoimmune diseases are on the rise, and particularly this condition, fatty liver, and the consequences is frightening because it's literally there, but we can't see it yet. When it's starting to show, the problem is it's often too late. So I think it's really strange in one sense that people often think of things as two different things, and yet they're all part of the one spectrum.
Yeah.
But it is a fantastic film and a fantastic concept, and I was delighted to be here today.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to mention the work of a wonderful microbiome researcher, Fergus Shanahan, at UCC in Cork. And he looked at the gut. So the gut microbiota, all the organisms that are in our gut, are the frontline defense against developing inflammatory disease, which is why really nice that Ollie brought the yogurt. So the more that you are eating fermented foods, or the more that you're exposing yourself to a microbially diverse reality, rolling in the dirt, walking on the earth, putting your hands in the earth, the more you're in relationship with the biology that will protect you from inflammatory disease. Fergus did a study on the forced settlement of the traveller community in Ireland. And what he found, so that there are these ancient strains of microbes that are highly resistant against modern diseases. And they exist in the people who are the descendants of the Aztec, who are living the way that they did for thousands of years. They exist in my friend Namontin and Kemo's family, who are Waorani people of the uncontacted tribe of the Amazon. They exist in small-scale horticulturalists in Tanzania and in India. And these strains existed in the Irish travelers. These are ancient strains. I call these the ancestors. So when we're praying, those are who we're praying to. And so those ancestors so the traveler community had diseases we associate with poverty, but they did not have inflammatory bowel disease. They did not have asthma and eczema, these things that are so common in modern settled human beings. Within just a few years of being forced into public housing, away from their traditional relationships with land and their animals and their big family systems, they lost those microbes. Once they're gone, they're gone. You cannot get them back. So forced settlement of ethnic groups that are in relationship with the earth it's an ecocide genocide. It's a killing of a culture that is so wrong. So looking at the racism towards travelers, not even just, obviously like what we're seeing with, the far right belittling the immigrants. It's the Trump playbook, so that we don't punch up, we punch at each other, and then we're all screwed. But it's the fact that the people who are distracting us are taking the money off the island. That money's not staying here. That money is gone, which means the infrastructure for Ireland is hurting. The society is hollowed out. That's a colonial reality. So Ireland became free from the British Empire in name, but all those structures are still here. And it requires a struggle together. And that struggle is one that the immigrants who are coming here, like myself, I can't go back to the United States right now. I said capitalism too many times. And so I'm here, and I love it here. But like the people like me who are here to do the work with you, and to say, let's struggle in this together, that's solidarity. Let's struggle with our Palestinian friends. Let's make sure that those children get food. Let's make sure that everybody eats. Let's make sure that the money stays here. That's a revolutionary struggle that requires broad political understanding and friendship and solidarity, and remembering the things that they've all forced us to forget. And so we're lucky that we have Mahmoud here today, and that we have so many relationships with people, the Black Panther Party in Oakland, who are doing a food program with us now on the rooftop called Let's Get Growing or Globalize the Plantifada. That's what we're doing. And we're just gonna start teaching people how to rip up their lawns and grow food in Oakland, because in 6 months from now, no one is in the fields. There are no farm workers in the fields in California right now, because they're all afraid of ice. So our food system is like a 6 to 18 month timeline. And we're gonna be in a big mess. And that's what the powers that be want, so that then we start hating each other, fighting each other, and killing each other. Let's not do that. Let's start building communities of care, practices of healing. That's the vision that we want.
Yes. Just to follow on with sort of two things there as well, like there's an extra layer of extreme crisis with the Straits of Hormuz, obviously, at the moment. So there's like every one of the fertilizers are going to cost 20-30% more. And every 3 years or so now, there's an emergency bailout that's directly to do with a market crisis, a climate crisis, a fuel crisis, a fertilizer crisis. But so and then actually in every 18 months there's an emergency payment in farming. So for the last 15 years, every 15 to 18 months, there's been some class of an emergency payment because the system's not working. That's quite scary. So we need to really put that agroecological infrastructure in place as soon as possible, because there's only a few dozen formal horticulturalists left in the country out of 135,000 farmers. But we can do things quickly. We did, in a 60-year period, do a 97% land turnaround when we all came together, and when what was called then constitutional nationalists and the physical force tradition back in the 1800s came together for what was called the land wars, which was actually one of the largest non-violent peaceful movements of success that has ever happened. And it did that. It did a 97% shift. You had the biggest empire in the world with the most powerful military in the world, and in 60 years, because people came together and agreed that land was the topic, they ended up setting up dairy co-ops. They had boycotts, they had cattle runs, they had a million different ways, some of which were just invented at that time to deal with getting the land back to an extent. So the setting up of hundreds and then a couple of thousand dairy co-ops was part of that. It's not a coincidence that Quebec and Catalan and the Basque Country are places with very powerful cooperative movements right now. They don't want to give the state the money. They maybe don't say that super loud, but that's definitely what's happening in those places. And it happened in Ireland too. In that period, we set up dozens and then hundreds and then a couple of thousand co-ops to keep the resources moving within the culture. So the means of production were seized through the Land Acts, and then the means of distribution and processing were seized through the establishment of co-ops. So before you even had 1916, you had a huge amount of the resource base had already been transferred. So that was a 60-year period where that happened. Also in the 1940s, in 1926 there was an Allotment Act. So by 1946 there was 40,000 new allotments in Ireland. which didn't exist before. So we can do these things on a scale when we work together, and it's all the sovereignties. It's food sovereignty, but also fuel sovereignty and housing sovereignty, and all the sovereignties working together so that we can be, self-reliantly resilient while being engaged with the world. But it's more important now than it was, even just because of this extra, just one more emergency crisis, and we've got such a skewed agri-food system now that even just the ability to grow food and move it around is way under-organised relative to what it should be. So we need to get on it, as soon as possible, now-ish. That would be good.
We have another question there just in the middle.
Especially Catherine, it's Americana agus Tamim Mahoney in era Triachablina. And I would like to say thank you very much, particularly to Rupa, for starting with the Irish language, because although you've referred to it by using it, we haven't actually said that's a form of sovereignty too. And it's one that is stripped away with colonialism on a regular basis. And it's something that's really only starting to begin to trend again in Ireland. My late husband published a really big scholarly work on the place names of Inishowen. And when you're talking about land and language, the place names is the intersection. And it holds so much of the stories, so much of the history, so much of the soul of the people, the ancestors. And even beyond the immediate ancestors, as I was saying to Rose, I think yesterday or today, there are names of mountains in Ireland that are older than Celtic and Gaelic languages. They go back to the very first people who came here. So I just wanted to add that to your thing.
Thank you.
Thank you for speaking.
There's a study that we talked about in our book that really got me thinking about chronic inflammatory disease, because when I was touring around the world, I started to just call it a colonized people's syndrome. It's like, why are we seeing such a high burden of these certain diseases in these certain places? And Ireland was one of the places where I was like, what's going on in Ireland? And that's when I started understanding that it's the structures, and that's when the science advanced to be like, actually, all these diseases are inflammatory. All of these diseases are based on a dysregulated, or actually the normal response of an immune system to damaged signals. And one of the first studies I read was one where it looked at age-matched and body mass index matched people, First Nations people in Canada, so-called Canada. And it looked at them and it said, okay, who's developing diabetes, type 2 diabetes? And they found that these people ate the same diet, they had the same weight, they were in the same community. The people who spoke their language had a much lower, statistically significantly lower rate of type 2 diabetes. They also had an overwhelmingly lower rate of youth suicide. So the knowingness of who we are through the language, and it made me think about the tongue. The tongue, is it called changa? Changa. The tongue is connected to the most ancient part of our brain. It's innervated by the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is actually a nerve that goes all over our bodies. It's named the vagus nerve because it's like a vagabond. It moves all over the body. And it helps tone an anti-inflammatory response. So when we are eating of the land, and we are speaking of the land, we are becoming of a place. And that's a very important idea. Plus, I think yoga is just sexy. So I speak 5 languages, and it's the most romantic, and it's just a beautiful language. So I'm enjoying trying.
Lovely. Also, just to add as well, we do an apple festival. Give it a every we do an apple festival, Sail in the Moon, in Cloughjordan. And it's called Sail in the Moon, and we published a booklet called Ulra Dulra Agus Puggle to accompany it last year. And one of the things we did was on lookanam.ie, we developed a map of Irish place names which come from apples. So you can check the nearest place name to where you live on Luganum by checking that map. So yeah, and there are these little ways that you can start to rebuild the culture, you know. So we, you know, because like the apples were one of the 12 noble trees in Ireland, and yeah, rerouting a food sovereignty culture through the abundance of apples. Apples are really good for decommodifying as well. We don't necessarily fully agree on all aspects of decommodifying agriculture and farming and food and so on. But apples are amazing for that because you can have hundreds of apple trees in your landscape, and within 10, 15 years you've got a waste management problem. Unless you start to process your apples together, start to get the equipment to do that together, all of a sudden you're making community. And then you can even start making it by doing things like the place names and the history and the culture. And so I highly recommend organising an apple festival in your community to start to build food sovereignty in a very deep way as well, including through language.
Thank you very much, Ollie.
I have just one thing to add. I'm sorry, I just got really excited when you talked about that. Because there's a place down in Cork that's called and I can't remember the name, but there is also a place up here in Moville, outside of Moville, that is called Glenagalt. Glenagalt means the Glen of the Lunatics. Okay? And there is a place called Glenagalt down in Cork as well, where there is Toradh, which is a well of the lunatics. And at some point, they actually tested the water at the Toradh and discovered that there was naturally occurring lithium.
Yeah, that's
And
it.
that would have been why people came there for mental health. So really important. We have one up here in Moville, outside Moville, and it's also associated with the cave of Cleana, who was a goddess of healing, and a Bridget's Well, which is another. So there's a whole mountaintop there that is probably associated with the healing center that would have been used anciently. So I just got excited, sorry.
Just one thing to back as well. Well, I just mentioned as well, Donegal has given the world many things, but one of the things that gave, which I was talking to Bernard about down there at the back, was the Miss Perry apple. The Miss Perry apple is an amazingly abundant apple. We have it in Cloughjordan. It came from one garden, from one woman called Miss Perry in Donegal. It was saved by one of the guys who was actually the farmer on our farm for about 15 years. And it was like there was only really one of them. Or just whatever she had in her garden, basically. That was it. There was none anywhere else. And it's incredibly prolific. It's like, the apples are enormous and it's really abundant and it self-roots. So the work that seed savers have done for seed sovereignty and saving those dozens of apple varieties, which are now available to all of us, like is really powerful. And so tapping into that and getting that stuff in our landscapes is really what we need to start doing to build proper food sovereignty.
Do we have a question about the back there?
Hi everyone, my name is Anne, I'm mother. Thanks so much, Rupa, and thanks for the film that we watched today. We've talked so much about growing, and if we take a good look at everyone sitting down here today, large number of us are on the older side. My question is, how do we get the younger ones? If you take a good look around the world right now, not just in the Irish community, around the whole world, you find that it has to do with the elder ones who are out there growing things. The younger ones are no longer interested. So the question right now is, how do we get the younger ones to get involved?
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you. So as a mother of two sons who are 12 and 7, I just don't let them play video games. I don't give them a screen except for like 30 minutes on a Saturday. They call me, like, they say I'm an authoritarian parent. I'm like, you will be grateful when your brain works, because now the data is showing that this generation that's coming up is cognitively delayed compared to their parents. The entire generation. And the tools, and I'm calling it negligence, and I think parents should be aware that it's negligence. Giving your child a screen is an act of negligence. These screens are being created by people who are murdering children in their beds in Gaza. These screens are being made by people who are now surveilling my neighbors and disappearing them in the middle of the night. So we're like, what is this, right? And why have we abandoned our parenting? I didn't have kids so I could watch them do this. I had kids so I could sit and talk with them and get out on the land. And the more time that kids get on the land and they detox from the screens, from the social media, from the video games, they awaken. But it's gonna be a struggle because they become addicted. These are addictions. And they're anesthetizing. And actually the builder I just met, who's helping me build a greenhouse right now, he's in his 30s, and he said, young men across Ireland are castrating themselves with video games. Those are his words. Literally becoming inert from this visual processing. People don't have conversations anymore. They don't know how to hold critical dialogue and discourse, how to disagree with each other and still love each other and show up. Don't know how to have a mehil anymore. Don't know how to go to the land. So you're right, it is young people, and this will be a struggle. But I'm excited that Talamh, which you guys should all join the organization, we're all part of it. So the Agroecology Farmers Association. I don't farm as much as the farmers, the actual farmers do, but I'm there to support the transformation of a food system into an agroecology food system here in Ireland. And so that organization has a young group of farmers, Talamh, and they're meeting at the Eco Village in a couple of weeks. So we need to support these people. We need to get them land access. We need to give them funding and support so that they know that their work on the land is actually the sexiest work they could be doing right now.
Yeah. So Talamh are coming to Cloughjordan the first week in June. June, not July, June. And when we start to transition more to an agroecological infrastructure, because we just can't rely on, we shouldn't rely on the big F's that need to F off, like the fertilizers, the fossil fuels, the animal feeds. When we start to F off those things, it becomes labour intensive, like we saw in the movie. But labour intensive, neoliberal economists think that's a bad thing. But what it is a revitalised countryside. So like on the farm I mentioned earlier, the community farm we have in Cloughjordan, we have 3 young farmers under the age of 30. We have 5 volunteers from around Europe under the age of 30. They come with a budget, the Europeans. The others come from the collective money of the membership. So there's like 8 young people under the age of 30 growing agroecologically. And you know, we have 7 polytunnels. If we were super hardcore commercial, we'd have 12 polytunnels and 1 hardcore farmer with 1 labourer. And that's what we would do. But instead of that, we have 20 or 30 people organising so many different aspects of the thing. But there's there's people employed as well through the European schemes that the Trinity farmers come on. So we've employed 2 extra people to manage the volunteers. So all of a sudden, there's a farm that, we only pool about 80,000, 90,000 euros as a community of 120 people, 70 families. But we turn over 3 or 4 times that amount of money through interesting things to do in the countryside, basically. And it makes life better. I mean, there's a guy, Jorge, who came over from Spain a few years ago, and the local football team got promoted in the league because he was so much better than everyone else. It was always kind of banger playing for the local junior team, because it was just he was just one of the people who came, and he happened to be very, very, very good at football. So there's another guy who's working in a Michelin star restaurant now in Amsterdam. He's a Kurdish refugee, because back then the ESC took in people from Turkey. So he ended up staying in Ireland, getting asylum, and then becoming a chef in Michelin star restaurants here, and then going abroad to do it. And there's countless stories like that of the people who've come through this thing, and they're all young people, but it's because they come with a budget, right? It's like the Peace Corps in America. They come with a budget, so they don't have costs to be learning how to farm in our farm. And they only get a year, and it's not long enough. But systems like that are the systems we need. There's a thing called the OGI, the Organic Growers of Ireland. So they do a 1-year internship as well, which is quite good. But we need much more of that, and we need it for more than 1 year, and we need land access as well. We need a basic income and for farmers and for organisers in food to supply local and domestic markets, because the system is so skewed against them. CAP, the Common Agricultural Policy, introduces structural embedded inequalities in the agri-food system, which makes it impossible for growers to compete. So there's lots of significant changes that need to happen. I helped finish off the Environmental Pillars response to the consultation on Food Vision 2030, which is Ireland's agri-food plan. So that'll be available to have a look at. We threw some solutions in there as well. But it's bringing, once we've redressed the economic and social balance towards these kind of sovereignties, housing sovereignty, fuel sovereignty, food sovereignty, we start to enliven the countryside, enliven everywhere, and it gives young people meaning, especially in a context of so much uncertainty in the what's called the labour market, in other words, how people live and get joy from life. So leaning into that stuff definitely helps. I'm not saying it's super easy, but if we don't put that infrastructure in place, we'll be in a very perilous situation very soon.
Yeah, well, that's
Sorry, one of the pieces of infrastructure I'm working on at Trinity, so I came to the Trinity School of Medicine, is to develop farming as medicine here in Ireland. And what we're looking at there is taking hospital procurement dollars, modeling what it would be like to take, the X million euros for a place like St. James's Hospital, and give that money, instead of having that money go off for food that's grown abroad, give that money directly to Irish agroecological farmers. What would that do? And then they grow the food that would feed the people in the hospital. What would that do? We would create a short food supply chain with public procurement dollars. And that's what we're looking at doing over the next few years.
Imagine that. Imagine eating healthy, delicious food in the hospital. So yeah, actually, what we're chatting about now is really, or back to what Ollie mentioned about the actual change happening out in the field. Really leads on perfectly to your speakers out in the floor there. So we're going to hear from a few people who are doing great work on the land. And first of all, we've got Gary, McLaughlin, Toradh, Talun. Let's say a few things about. Oh yeah, the question. What was the question? What are your dreams for your project or farm? I've got a little bell because we're obviously already running behind time.
Hello everyone. Any of you who know me will know why there's a 5-minute time limit and then amount of time.
Oh, I need to have a bell.
So, I am a farmer, although I don't like that term. What we do in Talun is a very hard thing to explain because we don't know ourselves. I have a farm called Potts Farm. It's been in the family for years and years and years. So, what I decided to do was just open the farm up and let anybody who wanted to come and farm. And that's exactly what happened. And at the start of the year, I had a conversation with Joanne, and we put the word out, and we got people to come along. And you may be surprised, but it was all women. Every single one of the people who came was women. One of the women who comes out, Deirdre, her husband asked the question, why would you bother going out? Because all they get when they come out to the farm, to me, is the food. So at the minute, everyone is sick of looking at salad. But a few months' time, we're going to have a lot more produce. But they come out, they help, they take whatever the hell they want off that farm. I got a load of mushroom compost, and if you wanted mushroom compost, you just took it. I have a little BCS 2-wheel tractor. If you wanted that, I'll come out, I'll plough whatever the hell you want. So if you need front gardens, I'm your man. So, and that's what we do. The whole idea is we've no structure at all. There's no management there. because if there was a management and I became management, I am a fucking tyrant. So we keep power away from me. That's the whole idea. So, but everyone is equal. Everyone brings something to the table. The idea is, it's based on indigenous ideas of, if you have a marketplace, somebody came along with blankets, they give their blankets away. Somebody had food, they give their food away. Somebody had medicine, they give their food away. You took what you needed from the village. And you were judged by what you gave, not what you had in your pocket. Not by your big fancy BMW or Audi or whatever other stupid Tesla, the Nazi mobile, anything like that. You're judged by what you give to the community. And I'm very, very passionate about that. How we fund the farm is of the Department of Agriculture. I'm given money to be an intensive horticulturist. Do not tell them I am not an intensive agriculturist. The money goes into a pot, and we run the farm for a couple of thousand a year. Whatever food we have then that we don't take home ourselves goes to the food pantry in Buncrana here. So, and hopefully now the community garden in Buncrana will start growing for the food pantry in Buncrana, and then we will go to Kilmany, and that is me. Thank you.
Next up, we're going to hear from Laura from Future Oak. Is she, where are you at, Laura? There you are down the back.
Would you mind coming up here, Laura? Yeah.
Hello. Can you see me? Great. Always start the timer.
Yeah, that's where you do.
Hello everyone. I see some familiar faces. Hi Rupa, hi Ollie, Joanne, and lots of people in the room. So I'm from Future Oak Farm. We're based in Churchill, beside Gartlock, so we drove up today to see us. I run the farm with my partner John, who originally started the project over 10 years ago. When he returned to the family farm to try and do things a little bit differently. And I think we've achieved that in a small way. So we run our farm in a regenerative way. We fully outwinter our cattle, and we're zero input. So we just manage our grazing really well, so that we're able to regenerate our soils. And we test that, we survey, we can see year on year that the system's becoming more complex and therefore able to sustain more. But that is only part of it. A big part of our work is, bringing more people onto the land in different ways. So we have an interesting site. It's over 8 different sites. And we have a herd of cattle that we have to get round across 3 miles, and we don't have a tractor. So we use people power. We invite people to come and walk cattle down the road, and this causes commotion, and it causes a lot of laughs, but crucially it brings our neighbours out of their houses to come and see what's going on. And it brings people in connection with the land, so that they're able to see the systems that are supporting food production. Part of the work as well is working with collaborators that are interested in similar work, but from maybe a different lens. So part of what we've done is working with a group called Thriving Together, which are people that maybe have land-based enterprises that are working at growing food, or else they're interested in it from a sort of transition and climate change angle, or they're interested in it from a health and well-being sort of thing. And part of that is to come together so that we can start to look at really local solutions to problems. And that's where I suppose ChangeMakers Seeds of Change Fund really comes in that it gives you a small pot of money to do something. And part of what we did was to bring back skills of canning and food preservation, so that people can rediscover that little piece of food sovereignty locally. And we now have our own canning materials that we can use locally and support sort of relocalizing food. But yeah, it's a very fun project to be involved in, and it's exciting work because particularly what we're noticing is that whenever you start talking about your work and crucially supporting other people to learn, you make a lot of connections. So we are also educators, so we work with Donegal ETB and Shield to Cree to provide education on farming, regenerative farming, and then also managing landscapes. And that's really great because what we're finding is that more and more people, specifically in Donegal, are interested in that transition and learning more.
Thank you so much, Laura. It's really amazing to hear about the work you're doing. And so next up we have John Hamilton, farmer from Burt. So John, for yourself, what are your dreams for your farm?
My dreams for my farm, I was a stonemason until I was 40 and making plenty of money and no stress, and then this boy here come along. And when I was about 3, I realised I really wanted to be a farmer. So I had to spend all my hard-earned stone building money building up a farm. So hopefully he takes it over and stays organic. We've been organic now for 17 years. And well, I don't call myself an organic farmer, I'm just a farmer. But I call my neighbours toxic chemical farmers. That's my line. And we're starting to bring a wee bit of regenerative into the organic system because we have a farm in St Johnson and a farm in Burt, and it's getting the farmyard manure from the home farm to the other farm. That 8 miles is a torture. So, but anyway, we have, I don't know, running things down to see where we're going. Yeah, so we have about 75 cattle on the farm and 50 sheep plus say about 80 lambs. And what we would love to do is that he kind of takes over the farming end of things and I take over the butchering end of things, and we butcher our own beef on the farm and sell them to our own customers in the county. Instead of, now we go to Cloughjordan for the cattle, they get killed, they take them down to Tipperary and they probably end up in the UK or Germany. So, but the problem with the whole thing is when you have Board Bia, that this man mentioned, you have the environmental health officers, you have the Department of Agriculture, and everybody is just trying to put a spanner in the works and put hurdles in your way. And I think they just want the big boy to succeed and the wee man to just forget about it. And that's the way I see farming going. Up around us, it's the big dairy farmers are just taking over more and more, and somebody like Zach coming on isn't getting a chance to do it, you know. But anyway, we'll just keep fighting on and hopefully be able to develop it. But that's where I would love to see the farm going. That we're selling our own beef, our own lamb, and we're producing everything to the Irish Organic Association standards. The cattle are lying in straw bedding, not in slats. We produce all our own silage, which a couple of years ago we went up to the silage awards in Mount Errigal, and we had 199 conventional farmers, and we won best bale silage in Donegal. That was a real victory, and it just showed the boys what we can do organically. And the Irish Organic Association were there, and the woman that runs it, she was delighted. We'll keep struggling on, and hopefully he'll take over the farming and I'll take over the butchering. Because we used to do it about 10 years ago. We were butchering, well, free range pigs and organic lamb. then I had a wee health issue, and I sort of, well, when you have two doctors in Galway that can't decide if you've got cancer or not, you know, you sort of cut things back instead of going forward. So anyway, all clear, good to go. So that's my story. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, no, I didn't even need the bell for Mark. So next, last but definitely not least, because we were so lucky to have Mahmoud Zwahra join us this weekend. We watched on My Land the film that Mahmoud brought to us yesterday out at Bernard's Farm in Derry, and it was just really amazing to hear Mahmoud talk about the land and to see the land through his eyes. So it's a really, Céad Míle Fáilte, it's a really big welcome to Buncrana, Mahmoud, and we'd love to hear from you about your dreams as well. Thank you.
Thank you all. And let me just say a few words about what I was hearing from you about food sovereignty and your dreams. And when it comes, for example, to my parents and the elderly people in our village, if they see us eating, for example, grapes in October, they will say, this will hurt your body. If they will see us, there is a joke, how come you are eating watermelon in a windy weather or in a rainy weather? This will hurt your body. From a medicine perspective. And this is the way that our traditions, in a way, how we want to protect our bodies by following the cycle of the land, not the cycle of the market. So, and really when I am here in the UK and I go to the shop in December and I found the grapes, when did they cut the grapes? How much time it took them to bring to the market? In my country, if it's not fresh and I pick it from the grape tree, I will not eat it. So how come I will be waiting for 15 days, 20 days until what kind of chemicals they give to this? And this is part of my dream, is just to keep the cycle of the land and to respect the cycle of the land when it become exactly ready to be pregnant, and we make it pregnant naturally. And when it gives birth naturally. And that's what we want. So that's why we call it our mother. Because if we keep the mother cycle, then we protect the land. If we intervene as we are intervening, then we are going to change the cycle. And then we will face problems. And then the nature will be angry. And then our body will be angry. And that's what my dream is, how to maintain this cycle. How come tomato is in summer, and if we want to eat tomato in winter, we dry them. And that's why when I was entering my grandmother's house, what is in that basket? Dry tomato, dry grapes, dry in winter. And that's the food sovereignty. And when they intervene, the top down, the evil is the top down. The government's policies are the evil. Why? For example, in Gaza, around the buffer zone, there were like orange trees and all of that kind of indigenous trees that is growing there. So they come to the farmers. You want to make more money? You want to make more money? How come? Cut the orange trees. Plant flowers. Look at Holland, how much they are making flowers. And what was the idea? The idea was just to make it good for the sight of the Israeli soldiers, so there will be no Palestinian hiding behind the orange trees. And they plant the flower, and the flower really grow very well. But how old the flowers, for how many days it will last if when the Israeli block the Gaza Strip? 1 week, and they put it in the rubbish. While the orange, we were able to make juice and last for a year or more. So that's the kind of intervention, the evil intervention. When you look at the land from the lenses of beneficiary and loss, it is exactly when you, as you are selling your mother, put it in the market, this is how, when you deal with the land, how much money you are going to make from it. And then you can easily sell. And this explains why some Palestinian farmers refuse to sell their land. You know, in Palestine, 1,000 square meter, a farmer, they offered him $15 million. $15 million. In near my village, where I'm living near Bethlehem, 15 million the Israeli settlers offered him. And he refused. He refused, and he preferred that they will take it, and they took the land for free, but he's happy because he never betrayed his mother. He never betrayed his mother and sell his mother in the market with money. And that's what my dream is, how to keep valuing the land and the relationship with the land. And if you do not maintain a relationship with the land, you will look at the land the same as you look for the car or anything you can sell and buy. So one day, a farmer went to visit his land, and he started talking to his land. He said to his land, joking, "I will stop cutting the branches of the tree." The land replied, "It's fine, it's okay." And he said, "I will stop claiming the land." The land said, "It's okay." And "I will stop," the land replying, "Yes, no problem." And he said, "I will stop visiting you." And he said, the land replied, "Now you will lose me. Now you will lose me if you stop visiting me," exactly the same as your mother. Because if you stop, when you visit and you see something wrong, you repair it. But if you stop visiting, you will lose the land. And as far as we maintain this relation with the land, as the land wish, exactly like a love story, then we will have no climate problems. Then we will have no environmental problems. But if we force the land to be pregnant and to give it twins and 4 and 5, then there will be problems in the body and in the surroundings. And that's where we need to keep. When we touch the soil, we will never have problems. My father always refused to plow the land with the tractor, plough, you call it in English, with the tractor. Because how come? With all this noise from the engine, you will listen to the soil of the land. We always do that on the mule and horses, and then slowly you can see which soil is sick, which plant is sick, as if you are taking care of your children and your mother. And when you come closer to the land and you lie on the land, as exactly as when you put your head on the leg of your mother. And when your mother touch your head, this is mercy from the land to you. And that's where we will come with the heel, with the inner peace. And when my father want to go out with the sheep, he will tell my mother, let the goats outside because I want to have I don't know in English how we say it, but something like I am looking for inner peace, so I want to go to the nature, I want to go with my sheep and my goats. That's the healing. That's the way when we maintain the indigeneity of the people and the traditions that bring people together. And when we go a little bit more to another level, which is how the society is accepting, that's where we want to maintain. And in Palestine, for example, when the grape season is approaching and the farmer is waiting to have some money, because we have no government in Palestine, and it's not allowed to support the Ministry of Agriculture. The Ministry of Agriculture is 0.05 from the total budget of the Palestinian Authority, while the security is 40%, thanks to the Americans bringing the dollars in the in the bags to the Palestinian security because they have a duty to protect the Israeli security. And this is the concern of Europe and America, is how to protect the Israeli settlers to conduct crimes against the Palestinians. So it's not allowed to invest in agriculture in Palestine. So that's why we need to maintain this relationship between the farmers and the market, and to keep this ethics in it, because at the time when the grapes of the farmers is ready, Israel floored the Palestinian market with the grapes. So the prices go down and the farmers lose. And when the Palestinians plant in the greenhouses, the Israelis block the water when the fruits are due. So the farmers lose. And that's why it's super challenging in Palestine to maintain the food sovereignty. But always the crisis bring people to be in solidarity with each other. So if I have eggs, and I give you eggs, you give me milk. If I have tomato, I give you tomato, and you give me back cucumber, and so on. And that's the solidarity that maintain us in Palestine. And since 48, we succeed. Our project succeed, and the Zionists failed. The Zionist movement promised to bring 20 million Zionists to Palestine. So far, we are the majority between the river and the sea. We lost 75,000 martyrs and all of what happened in Gaza, but we are still the majority between the river and the sea. And the future is for the farmers. The future is for the people who are protecting the nature in order humanity will continue. And at the end, farmers who are planting the trees, producing oxygen, coming from Ireland to Palestine, for our children to breathe, this will make our life continue forever, inshallah. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those. If anyone's interested, you can find up on the walls, there's a QR code that will take you to the Palestine Social Fund. And that's a great place to put funds towards to support farmers both in Gaza and the West Bank.
And just on that as well, the Palestine Social Fund is very much about helping Palestinian farmers stay on their land and supply local Palestinian markets as well. They've very much got a food sovereignty focus. You know, myself and Joanne have met them online a couple of times and been to events with them and checked in with farmers who've been benefiting from them as well, like Adam Kurja, who was a young farmer who was in the Shield of Korea webinar we did last month. So Palestine Social Fund is very much worth supporting, because it's not just about food aid, it's about giving people the opportunity to grow food in Palestine for Palestinian people.
So yeah, it's about food sovereignty, not about food aid. I just want to ask everyone to give a big round of applause for all our speakers, for Mahmoud, for Barry, for Mark, for Laura, and of course for Rupa and Ollie here as well. It's been really great hearing from everybody. Also, while the amazing chefs at Fullerton are cooking up our food, we're going to move into a more imaginative group vibe while our food is about to be served. So do you want to join the groups? Yeah, great. There should be some seats down there for you.